Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving into one of the most dynamic and, honestly, contradictory periods in all of history, Georgian Britain.
So what do they have in common? Well, they were all born out of this incredibly turbulent and, frankly, contradictory time in history, the Georgian Era. And believe me, this was a period of such massive change that it basically set the stage for the world we live in right now.
All right, so where do we even start this story? Let's go back to 1760. Because that year, a new kind of king took the throne, and he was about to set the tone for everything that followed.
See, this is King George III, and what made him so different was that unlike the two Georges who came before him, who were, German-born, he was fiercely, proudly British. And that wasn't just some little biographical detail. No, it was this huge symbol of a new national identity. For a while there, it really seemed like his incredibly long, 60-year reign was going to usher in an age of stability and prosperity.
I mean, that's a really powerful line, right? I glory in the name Britain. This was the very start of an era of just immense national confidence, a kind of self-assurance that would fuel Britain to go out and reshape the entire globe. And let's be clear, that was for better and for worse.
Okay, so let's get into what was fueling all this confidence. It was this incredible explosion of discovery. I mean, during this time in Georgian Britain, science and reason, they were everything.
I mean, just take a look at some of these breakthroughs. You've got Edward Jenner coming up with the smallpox vaccine, a discovery that would save literally countless lives. Then there's Joseph Priestley, who identifies oxygen, completely changing how we understand life itself. And this drive to understand and categorize everything, it wasn't just happening in science. You had scholars like Samuel Johnson trying to catalog all of human knowledge, which gave us the first real English dictionary and the Encyclopedia Britannica.
And that same impulse, the need to explore, to chart, to categorize, it pushed out to the furthest corners of the globe. Think about Captain James Cook's voyages to the Pacific. They were made possible by new tech, like the chronometer, but they weren't just about discovery. They were about ordering the world, about, literally putting entire new continents on Britain's map.
But this neat and tidy world of science and discovery, this whole age of reason, it was about to be absolutely shattered. And it was all because of the shock of revolution. The first shockwave actually came from inside its own empire. Yep, in 1776, Britain's American colonies, who were pretty fed up with taxes and being controlled from all the way back in London, just declared their independence. Losing America was a huge blow for sure, but an even bigger storm was brewing just a stone's throw away, right across the English Channel. So, in 1789, revolution explodes in France. And at first, a lot of people in Britain were actually cheering it on. But then, it took a radical turn. The French king was executed, the Reign of Terror began, and that absolutely horrified the British establishment. It kicked off this massive crackdown on any radical ideas back home, and it plunged Britain into a war with France that would last for a whole generation. And here's where things get really interesting. While Britain is out there fighting wars, supposedly over ideas of liberty, its own society back home was just riddled with contradictions. I'm talking about an age of incredible progress right alongside desperate poverty. An age of refined liberty and brutal slavery, all existing at the exact same time. So for the wealthy, this was a total golden age. Trade was booming, factories were taking off, and the upper class, along with the brand new middle class, was enjoying just enormous prosperity. And you can see it everywhere, in the art, in the grand architecture, in this whole lifestyle of fashionable leisure.
But flip the coin. And for the poor, it was a completely different world. Those same industries that were creating all that wealth, they were also creating these overcrowded, filthy slums. Workers were basically forced into towns and cities, living in just desperate poverty, earning wages that were next to nothing.
And what I think is so fascinating about this image is how you can see the social hierarchy. I mean, it was literally built right into the architecture. This diagram shows you the world of the owners on those grand main floors, and then the completely separate, hidden world of the servants downstairs, with their own staircases and tiny rooms tucked away at the very top.
But the biggest, most disturbing contradiction of them all was an empire that preached about liberty while they got rich from human bondage. I mean, the incredible wealth of Georgian Britain, from the sugar that sweetened their tea to the cotton that ran their mills, it was all built on the backs of hundreds of thousands of enslaved Africans.
Now, this massive contradiction, it didn't just go unchallenged.
a really powerful abolitionist movement began to grow, fueled by a new awareness of just how horrific slavery really was. And it took decades of tireless, difficult campaigning by activists like William Wilberforce and so many others, both black and white, to finally get the slave trade abolished in 1807, and then, eventually, to end slavery itself in 1833.
So how does this era of conflict and contradiction all wrap up? Well, the thing is, in a lot of ways, it didn't. Instead, it hammered out and forged the world that came next. It basically set the stage for the entire next century.
Okay, so Britain's long war against France, first revolutionary, then Napoleonic, it finally comes to a head in 1815. Napoleon is defeated at the Battle of Waterloo, and that victory, it was absolutely decisive. It left Britain as the world's #1 military and economic superpower, a position it held on to for the next 100 years.
But you know, it wasn't just about military victory. Out of all that chaos, the war, the revolution, a whole new culture started to emerge. You had artists and poets of what we now call the Romantic movement, and they totally rejected the cool, detached logic of the Enlightenment. For them, it was all about intense emotion, the raw power of nature, and the inner world of the individual.
And this new vibe, this focus on big emotions and wild imagination, it even gave us Gothic horror. Get this, in 1816, a 19-year-old Mary Shelley writes Frankenstein. It's this timeless story, right, about the dangers of scientific ambition getting out of control, and it was written in an era that had celebrated that very same ambition. I mean, if that's not a perfect Georgian contradiction, I don't know what is.
So, when you look back, you realize the Georgian era wasn't just one simple thing. It was this constant tug-of-war between opposing forces. It was an age of incredible light and profound darkness. An age of scientific reason and revolutionary terror. An age that talked about a fierce love for freedom, while the chains of slavery were very, very real.
And here's the kicker. Those contradictions, they didn't just fade away. They laid the actual foundations of the world we live in now. And they left us with these really tough questions about progress and power and justice that honestly, we are all still wrestling with today.